A single chord. Then silence. For over 20 years, Johannes Brahms carried a burden no composer should carry. He was declared Beethoven's heir before he had written a single symphony. He burned draft after draft, destroying more music than most composers ever created. Was Brahms just a traditional composer? Or the last true guardian of classical music? That answer begins with one article, and a young man from the slums of Hamburg. This pressure would define him. But this came at a cost. This is where everything becomes personal. He refused to change. While the world moved forward, he stood still. And this is why he was misunderstood. His father, Johann Jakob, played double bass wherever he could, in dance halls, militia bands and smoky taverns, while his mother, 17 years older, patched clothes to keep the family afloat. Music wasn't a luxury, it was survival. By age 10, Brahms was earning coins at the piano, playing waltzes and folk tunes for sailors and drunks, his small hands lost in the keys. This wasn't the romantic image of the prodigy in velvet. This was noise, sweat and hunger, the raw edge of the city shaping a boy who would later be accused of being too serious, too reserved. Behind closed doors, Brahms devoured Beethoven's scores, chasing the ghost of a composer he never met but could not escape. In Hamburg, he was just another working musician. Then, in 1853, everything changed. Violinist Joseph Joachim, already famous at 22, heard Brahms play and sensed something rare. He wrote to Robert Schumann, the most influential critic of the age, urging him to listen. That October, Brahms arrived in Dusseldorf, clutching his manuscripts, unsure if he would be welcomed or dismissed. Schumann didn't just welcome him. He wrote an article called Neue Bahnen, New Paths, proclaiming Brahms the chosen one, the heir to Beethoven. Schumann described him as a disciple, indicated from on high, a new mighty St. John who would carry music forward. Overnight, Brahms was famous. With that fame came a weight few could bear. This pressure would define him. Fame arrived not as a reward, but as a burden. Schumann's proclamation echoed in every letter, every concert, every expectation pressed onto Brahms's shoulders. While others might have basked in the spotlight, he recoiled, turning inward. He began to scrutinize every note, every phrase, haunted by the fear that nothing he wrote could live up to the promise of being Beethoven's heir. The world saw a rising star. Brahms saw flaws, sometimes so glaring to him that he would burn entire manuscripts rather than let them outlive his doubts. Draft after draft vanished into the fire, leaving only the most hard-won survivors. In a letter to Clara Schumann, he confessed, "I have destroyed so much this summer that I can't even remember what it was." His sketchbooks, when they survive, reveal pages of dense counterpoint, entire works mapped out and then abandoned. The process was slow, almost agonizing. The first symphony would take nearly 2 decades to reach the world, its early versions lost to the flames. Perfection for Brahms was not an ideal, but a necessity. He believed a piece had to be fully formed in his mind before a single note was set in ink. He urged friends to resist starting anything without a clear structure, warning that inspiration alone was not enough. In the solitude of his study, surrounded by scraps and ashes, Brahms forged a method that was less about chasing genius and more about taming it. Self-criticism became his shield against the weight of expectation, and destruction became the price of survival. This was not the brilliance of the showman, but the quiet, relentless struggle of a composer determined to build something that could last. But from the arguments raging in newspapers, salons and festival programs, the so-called War of the Romantics was in full swing. On one side stood Franz Liszt and Richard Wagner, leaders of the new German school, whose manifestos promised a future of music unbound by tradition. Their followers filled pamphlets with talk of progress and poetic transformation, championing symphonic poems and operas that blurred the lines between sound and story. Liszt's name glimmered on festival banners from Weimar, where his Faust symphony drew crowds eager for something daring and new. Wagner, ever the provocateur, dismissed the old ways as lifeless. calling for music that could sweep listeners into a fever dream of drama and desire. Against this storm, Brahms stood nearly silent. He refused to write program notes or offer grand explanations. His concerts in Leipzig and Vienna clung to Beethoven and Mozart, even as critics accused him of hiding behind their shadows. Yet the pressure mounted. In 1860, Brahms and Joseph Joachim signed a public manifesto denouncing the empty sensationalism and formlessness of the new German school. The document, published in Berlin's Echo, insisted that the spirit of true art was being lost to spectacle. Names like Waldemar Bargiel and Albert Dietrich joined the protest, but the backlash was swift. Wagner's camp mocked Brahms as a reactionary, a composer chained to the past. The battle lines were drawn in ink and in sound. For Brahms, every note became a quiet act of resistance, a refusal to trade depth for dazzle. The louder the world demanded novelty, the more fiercely he guarded the old forms, determined to prove that strength could live in restraint. In the heat of this ideological fight, Brahms's inward struggle only deepened as the expectations of a whole era pressed in from every side. Clara Schumann's handwriting filled hundreds of pages in Brahms's life, but her presence was always just out of reach. Their letters, exchanged for more than 40 years, are laced with longing and restraint, never quite love, never quite friendship, always something more. In one note, Brahms confessed, "I often have to force myself not to write to you every day." Clara was his confidant, his critic, the silent witness to his doubts and triumphs. After Robert Schumann's death, Brahms hovered at the edge of her family, sometimes caring for her children, sometimes vanishing for months. He poured his fears and ambitions into these letters, knowing she understood the cost of creation, the solitude, the need for approval, the terror of falling short. This connection was both a comfort and a curse. The closer he drew to Clara, the more isolated he became from the world around him. While Liszt dazzled audiences and Wagner courted controversy, Brahms returned to empty rooms, wrestling with sketches no one would ever hear. He wrote, "I must destroy much that is good, because it is not good enough." Each burned page was a silent confession, a refusal to let anything imperfect survive. Today, creators still face this private battle. In a world that rewards speed and spectacle, the slow, unseen work of perfection can feel like exile. The pressure to keep up with trends and algorithms mirrors the noise Brahms tuned out, and he chose instead the long, lonely path towards something lasting. His solitude was not a flaw, but the price he paid for music built to endure. Take his Variations on a Theme by Haydn. The opening motif is barely 8 bars, simple enough to hum, but listen as it transforms. Brahms stretches, twists, and reimagines this fragment, turning it upside down, breaking its rhythm, passing it from strings to winds, and back again. Each variation grows from the last, never repeating, always evolving, a process musicologists call developing variation. Instead of piling on new ideas, Brahms builds a living architecture, where every detail connects back to the original cell. The result is structure so tight, so organic, that the music feels inevitable. It's not spectacle, it's design, control, and hidden emotion. Perfection achieved not by showing off, but by making every note matter. Brahms's obsession with structure outlived him. In conservatories from Vienna to New York, his scores became blueprints for how to build music that endures. Students pore over his symphonies and chamber works, tracing the way a tiny motif can blossom into a whole movement, an approach now taught as developing variation. Film composers too have borrowed this method. John Williams and James Horner have both spoken of Brahms's influence, layering simple musical ideas to create tension and release, just as Brahms did in his First Symphony or the Haydn Variations. Orchestras and classrooms still dissect his counterpoint, his rhythmic tricks, his refusal to settle for the obvious. The world may have moved on from the wars between romantics and classicists, but in the language of modern music, Brahms's fingerprints remain. His pursuit of perfection, never spectacle, set a standard that shapes how composers think, write, and dream today. In an age obsessed with innovation, Brahms stands as proof that restraint can be radical. His relentless perfectionism reshaped orchestral composition and still haunts the global music industry. He didn't chase the future, he protected the past, and in doing so, he became timeless. What do you hear beneath the surface?